In the dark corners of the galaxy, where stars burn bright and vast planets float silently, the Galactic Empire ruled with an iron fist. They had conquered worlds beyond counting, each one bowing to their will. Their ships were massive, their armies endless, and their technology was far beyond anything the small planets could imagine. For them, no planet was too distant, no people too powerful to conquer. And now they had set their eyes on Earth. The Empire's scouts, who traveled far and wide, first noticed Earth while mapping distant stars. The planet was small and green, swirling with blue oceans and patches of land. At first, they thought it was just another insignificant world, one that had no chance of standing against their power. They did not see anything that could pose a threat. Earth had no galactic influence, no great military power, and no advanced technology. It was a place of simple creatures, fighting their own wars and struggling to survive. "Another weak planet," said Commander Varnak, as he studied the images of Earth through his ship's advanced technology. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the small world, his lips curling into a smug smile. "They are no different from the others we have conquered." Varnak was one of the Empire's best commanders. His fleet had crushed countless planets, and each time he had done it quickly and efficiently. He believed no one could stand in the Empire's way, and he was certain Earth would be no different. "Send the message," Varnak ordered, his voice calm and steady. The message was simple. The Empire was coming. There was no need for negotiation, no need for warnings. The people of Earth would either bow to the Empire or be destroyed. That was the way of the galaxy. And Earth, with its primitive technology, would be no different. Back on Earth, people were unaware of the Empire's plans. The world was busy with its daily life, people working, children playing, and nations dealing with their own problems. They had no idea that their peaceful existence was about to be shattered. The idea of a powerful alien empire coming to take their planet seemed impossible. Earth had never faced such a threat before, and most people believed it would never happen. After all, what could possibly be so powerful that it would want to conquer Earth? But as the Empire prepared its invasion, something strange began to happen. High above Earth, in the endless dark of space, the Empire's massive ships moved closer and closer, their engines humming with power. They were led by a ship unlike any other, the Vornak's Wrath, a colossal battleship that could destroy entire cities with a single blast. It was a ship built for domination, and it carried an army ready to sweep across the planet. As it approached Earth, the ship sent a signal, a simple message that echoed across the stars, meant to send fear into the hearts of anyone who would dare challenge the Empire's power. "Prepare to be conquered, Earth. The Empire has arrived." But despite the overwhelming power of the Empire, Earth's first reaction was not fear. Instead, something unexpected happened. Deep in Earth's history, there had been an ancient warning system designed to protect the planet from outside threats. It had been dormant for centuries, forgotten by most, but now it began to stir. Long-forgotten messages, encoded in the planet's oldest texts, started to surface. The messages were cryptic, but one thing was clear. Earth had a secret, something the Empire could never expect. Meanwhile, the people of Earth continued with their daily lives. They had no idea that their entire world was about to change. Some people noticed strange things in the sky, unusual lights flickering above the horizon, but most dismissed it as nothing more than weather patterns or a trick of the light. They had no way of knowing that their peaceful world was being watched by a mighty empire, preparing to strike. Back on the Vornak's Wrath, Commander Varnak stood at the ship's helm, staring out into the vast emptiness of space. He could see Earth now, small and fragile, hanging in the distance. His mind was already filled with thoughts of conquest. His empire would soon own this planet, and nothing would stand in their way. But as he looked closer, something caught his eye. It was faint, a small flicker in the distance, but it was unmistakable. A signal was coming from Earth. At first, he thought it was a mistake, but then it repeated. It was a message from Earth itself. The message was simple, clear, and to the point. Earth will fight. Varnak scoffed at the message. They think they can stop us, he muttered, shaking his head. Pathetic. The Empire was too powerful, he thought. Earth was too weak. There was no way they could stop the invasion. With a cold smile, Varnak turned to his officers. Prepare for landing. Earth's time is up. But what the Empire did not know was that this simple warning was the first sign of something much bigger, something that would soon turn the tides of this galactic conflict forever. As the days passed, Earth remained unaware of the full danger it was about to face. The message sent by the Empire had not yet reached the world's leaders, but the faint signal from the planet's past, hidden in the depths of history, was beginning to stir. The world was still going about its business, unaware that an ancient warning was waking up. Deep in a forgotten research center in the mountains, a small group of scientists worked quietly. Dr. Elena Moretti, a historian and expert in ancient technology, had always been fascinated by the old texts of Earth. She spent most of her days studying ancient records that no one cared about anymore. Some of her colleagues thought her obsession was silly, but Elena knew there was something important buried in the old history of Earth. One day, as she scanned an ancient data file, she found something that stopped her in her tracks. It was a message, strange and cryptic, hidden in a record that had been long overlooked. The message was encoded in an ancient language, and the words seemed out of place, as if they didn't belong to any known civilization on Earth. The message read, "When the stars turn against you, when the mighty come to conquer, remember this, Earth will rise. Earth will fight." Elena stared at the screen, her heart racing. She had read old myths and stories about warnings like this before, but never had she imagined one could be real. She quickly shared the message with her colleagues, but they were skeptical. "It's just a coincidence," one of them said, shaking his head. "Some old message from ancient times. Nothing more." But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something important was happening. As she dug deeper, she uncovered more pieces of the puzzle. The message wasn't just a single phrase. It was part of a much larger, ancient warning system, designed to alert Earth's people in times of great danger. A warning system that had been hidden for centuries, forgotten by most. The more Elena investigated, the more she realized that this wasn't just a message. It was a call to action. Meanwhile, across the globe, strange things began happening. People started noticing unusual activity in the sky. Bright flashes of light, strange sounds echoing from above. At first, no one paid much attention, but as the days went on, the signs grew harder to ignore. Governments and military leaders began receiving reports of strange, unidentified objects in the sky. They were fast, silent, and seemed to move with purpose. Some dismissed it as a natural phenomenon, others as a trick of the atmosphere, but many began to feel that something was very wrong. Back at the research center, Elena and her team worked tirelessly, trying to decode the full meaning of the message. As they analyzed the old texts, they found a pattern. The warning system had been activated many times in Earth's history. Each time, It had been triggered by a force far greater than humanity itself. The message had always been the same. Earth would rise. Earth would fight. But no one had ever known who or what had sent the warning or why. Alina, however, was not content with just the message. She wanted answers. She pushed her team to keep working, even when they were tired and discouraged. One night, as she pored over the ancient data files, something new caught her eye. An old map of the stars, marking the positions of planets long forgotten by modern Earth. And there it was, in the far reaches of space, a mark that had never been seen before. The mark was connected to a large, dark region of space where no earthly telescope had ever been able to reach. It was a place where no one had thought to look, and yet it seemed important. Alina felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what this could mean. The Empire, the mighty force from beyond the stars, had come from that very dark region. The warning had not been a coincidence. It was a message meant to alert Earth of the coming storm. With this new revelation, Alina took immediate action. She contacted the world's leaders, urging them to take the warning seriously. At first, they dismissed her as another person with wild ideas. But as more reports came in about the strange objects in the sky, they began to listen. Governments around the world started to mobilize, preparing for something they couldn't yet fully understand. Military forces began to coordinate, trying to figure out what they were up against. Earth's people began to fear the worst, and panic slowly started to spread. But it wasn't just fear that grew, it was determination. Across the world, people started talking. Scientists, engineers, and workers of every kind began to unite. They realized that Earth wasn't as helpless as they had once thought. Something had awakened in humanity. The ancient message wasn't just a warning, it was a challenge. A challenge to stand up and fight. Alina knew the Empire's attack was coming. She could feel it in her bones. But she also knew that Earth would not surrender without a fight. The warning had come to life, and Earth was ready to answer it. As the Empire's ships loomed closer, Earth's people made a choice. They would not be defeated. The warning was clear. Earth will rise. Earth will fight. And no matter how powerful the Empire was, they would soon find out that humanity was not as weak as they believed. As the days went by, the people of Earth became more aware of the strange happenings in the sky. The mysterious flashes of light, the dark shadows moving across the atmosphere, and the deep, unsettling hums vibrating through the air were becoming harder to ignore. Governments around the world, once dismissive, could no longer pretend that nothing was happening. The time had come to face the truth. Earth was about to be invaded by a powerful enemy from the stars. At the heart of this growing fear was Dr. Alina Moretti. After discovering the ancient warning system, she had spent every waking hour researching and decoding the messages from Earth's distant past. Her findings were both thrilling and terrifying. The ancient system, once thought to be a myth, was real, and it had warned of an event like the one Earth was now facing, an invasion from a force far more powerful than anything humanity had ever known. Alina knew what needed to be done. The world had to be ready, and the message had to be sent to the Empire. But it wasn't just a message of warning. It was a message of defiance. A message that Earth would not be easy to conquer. She spent hours working with military leaders, world governments, and communication experts to craft a single message that would reach the Empire loud and clear. The message had to be simple, it had to be direct, and it had to show the Empire that Earth was not afraid to fight back. After much debate, they decided on one phrase: "We will not surrender." It wasn't much, but it was enough. The message would be broadcast across the stars, sent to the Empire's ships that were already on their way to Earth. The military had access to powerful communication systems, but nothing on Earth could compare to the vast, nearly unstoppable power of the Empire's fleet. Alina knew that their message would have little effect on the Empire's commanders, but it was something that would show the Empire that Earth had its own will, its own strength. As the message was prepared for transmission, the world's leaders held an emergency meeting. The United Nations, along with the leaders of major countries, sat in a room that felt cold and heavy. They knew that they had to act quickly, but fear hung over them. What if the Empire was too powerful? What if the message they were about to send would only anger the invaders? What if Earth's resistance was crushed before it even began? Despite these fears, Alina stood up and addressed the group. "This is our only chance," she said firmly, her voice steady. "We may not be able to stop them with our current technology, but we can show them that we won't just roll over. We will fight for our planet. We will fight for our future." Her words gave the room a moment of quiet strength. The leaders looked at each other, unsure of what lay ahead. But they all knew that there was no turning back now. Earth had been given its warning, and now it was time to send a message of its own. The transmission was ready. A large satellite dish on the edge of the world's space station, once used for research, now pointed directly toward the fleet of Empire ships in the distance. The technology was crude by the Empire's standards, but it was all they had. With a deep breath, Alina pushed the button. The message was sent, a simple, powerful statement that carried through the vast emptiness of space. "We will not surrender." Back on Earth, people watched nervously as the message was broadcast. They weren't sure what would happen next, but for the first time in days, they felt something other than fear. They felt a small spark of hope. It was a symbol of their unity, a symbol that, no matter how small or weak they seemed compared to the Empire, they would not give up without a fight. The Empire, light years away, had no idea what was coming. Commander Varnek, aboard the Vornek's Wrath, stood in his command room, looking out over the cold vastness of space. His fleet was almost at Earth now, and victory was certain. His mind was already on the riches and power that would come with conquering such a primitive world. Then suddenly, a strange signal appeared on his display. It was a message from Earth, simple and direct. "We will not surrender." Varnak stared at the words, a deep chuckle escaping his lips. "They think they can stop us with words," he muttered. "Pathetic." His commanders joined in his laughter, but it wasn't out of amusement. It was out of arrogance. They thought this message was nothing more than a last-ditch effort from a weak planet, a planet too small to matter. Earth was about to be crushed, and this message would be nothing more than a fleeting moment of resistance. But Varnak didn't realize that something had changed. The message, though simple, had done something no one expected. It had united Earth. People all over the world heard the same words. "We will not surrender." It wasn't just a message to the Empire anymore. It was a rallying cry for all of humanity. People began to prepare in ways they never had before. People of all nations, backgrounds, and skills began to come together. They were ready to face the Empire, not with fear, but with the same defiance their message carried. And the Empire, they had underestimated Earth. What they thought would be an easy conquest was turning into a much harder fight, a fight they were not prepared for. As the message, "We will not surrender," echoed through space, a shift began to happen on Earth. The world, once busy with the normal pace of life, suddenly came alive with a new sense of purpose. People were no longer just sitting, waiting for the unknown invaders. Instead, they were preparing. Everyone, from government leaders to everyday citizens, understood one thing: Earth had to fight. The news spread quickly. Across television screens and social media, people saw the same message over and over again. We will not surrender. It was a message of strength, and it lit a fire in the hearts of many. People began to realize that Earth was not as weak as they had once thought. Yes, they had no galactic weapons or super-powered ships, but they had something the Empire couldn't understand: human will. And that, no matter how much the Empire underestimated it, was a force to be reckoned with. In every corner of the world, people started to get ready. Governments began to work together, sharing information and resources in ways they never had before. Military forces started to organize, and civilian groups formed volunteer armies. People were training. They were learning how to use weapons, how to defend their cities, and how to work as a united force. Earth's military leaders began to make quick plans, even if they didn't have much time. They knew they had to think differently if they were going to stand a chance against the Empire. Dr. Elena Moretti, the scientist who had uncovered the ancient warning, continued to work with military leaders, helping them understand how to use Earth's old technology. While the Empire's ships were far more advanced, Earth still had knowledge from the past, knowledge that could be the key to turning the tide. Elena and her team worked day and night, figuring out how to adapt Earth's old systems and use them in the fight. Old technologies like radio signals, mechanical weapons, and even basic machines were being brought back to life, modified for the war that was coming. It wasn't the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but it was all they had, and they were going to use it to its fullest. In underground bunkers, engineers and workers were building new machines, often using scrap metal and old equipment. No one cared about what they didn't have. They focused on what they could create. Every person, no matter how small or big their role, understood the importance of their work. They were preparing to face an enemy that could crush them with the power of their technology. But Earth's people were ready to prove that heart and determination could still make a difference. On the streets, people weren't just talking about the invasion. They were taking action. Citizens organized neighborhood watch groups, creating plans to protect their homes and families. In cities all over the world, people were learning basic survival skills: how to find clean water, how to stay safe in an attack, and how to defend themselves in case the enemy came knocking at their door. Earth was not just a planet anymore. It had become a battlefield in the hearts and minds of everyone living on it. The media played a big part in the preparation. News outlets no longer focused on the usual stories of politics, entertainment, and sports. Instead, the headlines were filled with one thing: how to prepare for the fight ahead. Training centers opened, where civilians could learn basic military tactics. People came together in community centers, churches, and schools to discuss what they could do to help. The world was no longer divided by politics or borders. Everyone had a single goal: survival. Even the younger generation, who had never known the threat of war, joined in. Teenagers and young adults volunteered in every way they could, helping to transport supplies, learning how to repair vehicles, and even learning the basics of defense. There was no room for fear, only the determination to protect their home. Leaders from all over the world continued to meet, working together to form a unified strategy. They knew the Empire would be here soon, and they had to have a plan in place. They quickly established global alliances and shared their best military resources. Technology was being shared, and weapons were being mass-produced. While Earth's technology was far from the Empire's, the people of Earth knew their strength wasn't in their technology alone. It was in their unity, their resolve, and their ability to adapt. Despite all of this preparation, the question still hung in the air: would it be enough? Could Earth, a small planet on the edge of the galaxy, stand against the mighty empire? Many didn't know, but the message had been clear from the beginning. We will not surrender. And as Earth's people prepared, that message echoed louder and louder, not just across space, but in the hearts of every person on the planet. They were ready to fight. They were ready to show the Empire that they had underestimated Earth's strength. And somewhere, high above, the Empire's fleet continued to approach. Commander Varnak, confident in his victory, had no idea that something was stirring on Earth. He thought the message they received was a joke. But what he didn't realize was that Earth wasn't just preparing to defend itself. It was preparing to fight back. The time had come. Earth's skies were no longer peaceful. The Empire's fleet, a massive collection of warships, hung like dark clouds above the planet. As the ships began to enter Earth's atmosphere, a feeling of dread washed over the people below. But Earth was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of action. The first battle was about to begin, and humanity was ready to defend its home. Dr. Elena Moretti watched from the military command center, her heart pounding. The world's leaders had decided to meet the Empire's fleet head-on. There would be no hiding, no retreat. Earth's forces had been preparing for months, building weapons and defenses from scratch, using what little technology they had. They weren't going to let the Empire take their planet without a fight. The battle began with a loud roar as Earth's first defensive missile fired into the sky. It was small compared to the Empire's weapons, but it carried a message. Earth will not surrender. The missile shot into the sky, and for a moment, it looked like it might hit one of the Empire's ships. But then, in a flash, the missile was destroyed by a beam of energy. The Empire's ships were far more advanced, and their weapons were far stronger. The people watching from below gasped as the missile was reduced to nothing in an instant. But Earth didn't give up. More missiles were launched, followed by fighter jets that zoomed into the sky. The Empire's ships, too high above, fired back with deadly beams of energy, cutting through the air and tearing apart the brave soldiers in their path. Explosions filled the sky as Earth's forces fought back with everything they had. One young pilot, Captain Sarah Lee, flew one of Earth's most advanced fighter jets. She had trained for months, learning how to fight in the skies and take down enemy ships. She had always dreamed of flying. But today, her dreams were tied to something bigger, defending her planet. As Sarah's jet zoomed past an enemy warship, she felt a rush of adrenaline. The Empire's ships were powerful, but they had weaknesses. She had learned how to use their own technology against them. With a quick move, she launched a guided missile at the ship's engines. The missile hit its target, causing a massive explosion. The ship shook violently, and smoke began to pour out of the damaged engines. Sarah felt a rush of pride and relief. They had struck back. But it wasn't over. The Empire's ships retaliated with deadly force. Earth's forces were outgunned and outmanned, but they weren't backing down. Every missile, every blast, every act of defiance was a statement that humanity would not be easily defeated. Meanwhile, back on the ground, soldiers were preparing for a different kind of fight. The Empire's ships had begun to deploy their ground forces, strange, armored creatures that looked like nothing Earth had ever seen. These alien soldiers were tall, strong, and covered in dark, shiny armor. They moved quickly, their weapons glowing with an eerie light. The Earth's ground troops, though vastly outnumbered, stood their ground. Tanks rolled out, firing heavy artillery at the incoming aliens. Soldiers took cover behind buildings and walls, aiming their rifles at the strange enemies. One soldier, Sergeant Miguel Alvarez, led a group of soldiers into a city that was under attack. The Empire's forces had landed in the city, and the streets were filled with chaos. Buildings were burning, and the air was thick with smoke. But Miguel was determined. He had seen what the Empire's ships could do, and he knew this was the first of many battles. But he also knew that Earth had one thing the Empire didn't: the will to fight. "Miguel, we need to move," one of his men shouted as they fired at the advancing enemy. Miguel nodded, leading his team forward. They were outmatched, but they kept fighting. They used the buildings for cover, setting up traps and ambushes to slow the alien forces down. The alien soldiers were strong, but they didn't understand the terrain of Earth. They weren't used to fighting on a planet with such unpredictable environments. Earth's soldiers used that to their advantage. The battle raged on for hours. Earth's forces were losing ground, but they weren't giving up. They had made it clear to the Empire that they weren't just going to hand over their planet. They fought with everything they had, using old weapons, new tactics, and the most powerful weapon of all: their unbreakable spirit. As the sun began to set, the first day of the battle came to an end. The Empire's ships had suffered damage, but they still held most of the sky. On the ground, the aliens had captured key positions in the city, but Earth's forces had held them off longer than expected. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a total loss either. It was the first step toward something greater. Elena stood in the command center, watching the battle unfold. She knew that the fight wasn't over. Earth had made its first stand, but there were many more battles to come. The Empire was not going to give up easily, but as she watched the brave men and women fighting, she felt a surge of hope. Earth was showing the Empire that it wasn't just a small, weak planet. It was a planet full of people who were willing to fight for their home, no matter the cost. The first fight had been a warning. Earth had shown the Empire what it was capable of. And now, the Empire knew Earth would not go down without a fight. The battle for Earth raged on. For hours, the sky was filled with the sounds of explosions and the roar of missiles. On the ground, the cities were scared by fire and smoke. The Empire's invasion had been met with fierce resistance, but the odds were still against Earth. The Empire's ships were superior, their weapons deadly and precise. Yet something was happening that Commander Varnak had not expected. He was starting to realize that Earth was not the weak, primitive planet he had believed it to be. Commander Varnak stood in his command room aboard the Vornak's Wrath, staring out into the vastness of space. His fleet had suffered damage, and his soldiers had been forced to fight harder than anticipated. But it wasn't the physical losses that troubled him. It was the spirit of the humans. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting with a passion, an energy that he hadn't expected. These humans, despite their lack of advanced technology, were showing a strength that was impossible to ignore. Varnak had expected Earth's forces to crumble quickly. He had thought that after a few strikes from his fleet, Earth would beg for mercy. Instead, the humans had held on, pushing back harder with each wave. They were like a fire that wouldn't be extinguished. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had made the Empire bleed. From his vantage point, Varnak could see the aftermath of the battle. His fleet was still far superior, but the humans had taken a toll. The Vornak's Wrath had suffered a hit to its main engine, and several smaller ships had been destroyed in skirmishes with Earth's fighter jets. There had been casualties on the Empire's side, something that Varnak never expected. It was beginning to dawn on him that this was not going to be an easy victory. Meanwhile, on Earth, the battle continued. The people, though exhausted, kept fighting. Soldiers, pilots, engineers, and civilians were all united by one goal: to protect their home. In the streets, Earth's soldiers fought to reclaim lost ground, using every bit of knowledge and creativity they had. They didn't have the advanced weapons of the Empire, but they made up for it with their resourcefulness. They used the city's terrain to their advantage, setting up ambushes, hiding in buildings, and taking the fight to the enemy. Sarah Lee, the young pilot, had been flying nonstop, her body exhausted but her spirit unbroken. She had been in the air for hours, dodging laser beams and firing missiles at the Empire's ships. She had taken down 2 enemy warships already, and each success fueled her determination. She had become a symbol of Earth's resilience, a symbol of the fight to keep their planet safe. She wasn't just a pilot anymore. She was a warrior. Back on the ground, Sergeant Miguel Alvarez led a small group of soldiers through the burning city streets. They had managed to push the enemy back a few blocks, but the Empire's forces were relentless. The alien soldiers were strong, but Miguel knew they weren't invincible. Earth had learned how to fight back. They had learned how to survive. "Stay close," Miguel ordered as they moved through the smoke-filled streets. "We hit them where they least expect it. Don't give them any room to breathe." His team nodded, silently following his lead. They had no fancy weapons or high-tech gadgets, but they had each other, and that was enough. Meanwhile, the Empire's command was starting to realize just how difficult this fight was becoming. Varnek's second-in-command, Commander Zarek, entered his room, a worried look on his face. "Sir, we've analyzed the reports. The humans, they're not like anything we faced before. They're adapting. They're learning. They're not giving up." Varnek narrowed his eyes. He had seen the reports. He had heard the stories from his commanders on the ground. The humans were fighting back in ways the Empire hadn't anticipated. Their unpredictable tactics, their willingness to sacrifice everything for their planet, were making it hard for the Empire to maintain control. Varnak had underestimated them. He had thought they were just a primitive race, but now he was beginning to see that they were something more. "Then we need to crush them quickly," Varnek said, his voice cold. "We cannot let this resistance grow. The longer we fight, the stronger they become." But even as he spoke, he knew that something had changed. The humans weren't just resisting. They were starting to win small victories. Earth was making it clear that it wasn't going to fall easily. The Empire might have the power, but Earth had something that was impossible to measure: its will to survive. As the hours passed, the battles continued. The Empire's ships were still in control of the skies, but Earth's forces were starting to push them back. The damage to the Empire's fleet was mounting, and the humans were showing no signs of slowing down. Commander Varnek couldn't believe it. He had expected to see fear, panic, and surrender, but what he saw instead was determination, hope, and a willingness to fight. Earth wasn't giving up. The Empire's soldiers were starting to question their mission. They had never seen anything like this before. The humans, in their desperation, had found strength in unity. The first day of battle had shown the Empire something they hadn't counted on. Earth's spirit was unbreakable, and no matter how powerful the Empire was, they couldn't take that away. As Varnak looked out into the battlefield below, he realized the truth. Earth was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their future, and that made them more dangerous than anything the Empire had ever faced. The battle had been fierce. The Empire's forces had initially overwhelmed Earth, but as the hours stretched into days, something unexpected began to happen. Earth was fighting back, harder, stronger, and smarter. The Empire had underestimated the will of humanity, and now the tide of war was shifting. Commander Varnak stood in his command center, his eyes fixed on the holographic map of the battlefield. His fleet, once so powerful, was now showing signs of wear. Ships had been damaged, soldiers had been lost, and his own commanders were growing increasingly frustrated. They had expected to crush Earth quickly. Instead, the humans were pushing back in ways that baffled the Empire. The reports were coming in from all fronts. The ground battle was no longer going in the Empire's favor. Earth's soldiers, though outnumbered and under-equipped, were learning fast. They had adapted to the Empire's tactics, using the terrain and their resourcefulness to their advantage. The alien soldiers, once so confident in their power, were now being driven back by the relentless human resistance. "Commander, the humans are starting to take control of the key cities," one of Varnak's officers reported. "Their ground forces have become more organized. Our troops are struggling to hold the lines." Varnak's jaw tightened. This was not how things were supposed to go. The Empire's ships had blasted through Earth's defenses, but now the fight was on the ground, and Earth's soldiers were proving to be a formidable force. "We need to reassess," Varnak muttered, his mind racing. The longer the battle continued, the more dangerous Earth's forces became. They had managed to push the Empire's ground troops back, and now their fighters in the sky were becoming more coordinated. Earth was learning how to fight, and each victory gave them more confidence. If they didn't act quickly, they might lose everything. Meanwhile, on Earth, the mood was changing. People who had once felt the crushing weight of fear were now filled with hope. The impossible seemed possible. Earth's forces were gaining ground, and each victory, no matter how small, gave them the strength to keep going. The Empire had come to conquer, but now, it seemed like the humans were the ones doing the conquering. Captain Sarah Lee had been flying nonstop, taking down enemy warships and dodging deadly blasts. The Empire's ships, while powerful, were beginning to show signs of weakness. The more Earth's pilots learned to fight, the more effective they became. Sarah had become one of the most skilled pilots in the sky, and with each successful strike, the Empire's grip on Earth grew weaker. "We've got them on the run," Sarah said into her radio as she flew alongside other pilots. "Keep pushing. We're not stopping now." Sergeant Miguel Alvarez, leading his team of soldiers on the ground, could feel the change in the air. The Empire's alien forces, though still formidable, were starting to retreat. The humans had taken back key positions in the city, and now the enemy was pulling back. "We're doing it," Miguel said to his squad as they advanced through the smoke-filled streets. "They're retreating. We've got them right where we want them." The Earth soldiers, though tired, were motivated by the sight of their enemies retreating. It was a moment they had dreamed of, something they had fought for. The Empire had underestimated their strength, and now they were paying the price. Back in space, Varnak knew the Empire's time on Earth was running out. He had never expected the humans to fight back this hard. And now, with each passing minute, the situation became more desperate. His fleet was damaged, his ground forces were faltering, and the morale of his soldiers was crumbling. The humans weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. "Sir," Commander Zarek said, stepping into the room with a worried look, "the humans are pushing us back. We're losing ground. The retreat might be our only option." Varnak clenched his fists. He had come to conquer Earth, not to retreat. But the reality was clear. The Empire could not afford to lose any more ships or soldiers. Earth's forces were relentless, and their spirit had proven to be too strong for the Empire to crush. It was time to make a decision. "We're pulling back," Varnak said, his voice cold but resolute. "Order the fleet to retreat. We can't risk further losses." The order was given. The Empire's fleet began to retreat, pulling back from Earth's atmosphere. The remaining warships turned their engines toward the edge of space, leaving behind the planet they had once thought would be an easy conquest. For the first time, the Empire had been forced to retreat. As the Empire's ships disappeared into the vastness of space, the people of Earth looked up at the sky with a sense of awe and disbelief. The battle wasn't over, but they had won the first and most important victory. The Empire had retreated. Earth had shown the galaxy that it was not a planet to be conquered without a fight. On the ground, soldiers, pilots, and civilians cheered. The streets were filled with the sound of victory as people hugged, high-fived, and celebrated. They had done the impossible. Earth had stood strong against the most powerful force in the galaxy, and they had driven it away. For Sarah, Miguel, and the others who had fought on the front lines, it was a moment of relief. But they knew the war was far from over. The Empire would return. But next time, Earth would be even more ready. Commander Varnak watched from his ship as Earth's defenses grew smaller in the distance. He knew this defeat would be a blow to the Empire's pride, and he understood that this war was far from finished. The retreat was only temporary. But for now, Earth had won. And in that victory, the Empire saw something that terrified them more than any weapon: humanity's unbreakable will to survive.